Throughout this training, all I did was showing you templates. And markup is just that, all about templates. But you don't want to repeat yourself, and oftentimes you want to group logic together in a reusable way. For that, you need components, but the concept of components does not exist in markup. But what is a component really? A component is a function or class that encapsulates a logic and returns something you can customize to display it in a reusable way. To show you that, I'll have a button template, but coding everything around this template is not modular and will be hard to reuse. Instead, I'll turn this into a function that returns this template. I'll also capitalize the name so we can make the distinction between a name template and a template component. With this, I can then take options to inject in the template. For familiarity, I'll create a button props interface with type and disabled properties, for example. I'll first take a content, then use my props as second argument. I can then inject these values and provide defaults for them. There is no rule on how you create a component. You can use class, functions, whatever. Here, I'll simply render a disable button with click me text. With everything encapsulated, I can take advantage of template life cycles to handle things here. I can change these life cycles. But again, if you don't like this syntax, change it to whatever you like. Markup does not limit you on how you define your components. I can turn this into a variable and use that instead to access the life cycles, then proceed to return it. Totally up to you how to handle things. I can also create a web component. If I check the markup documentation, there is a good example on how markup can help you simplify the creation of web components. Here, there is an example of a simple text field web component. I'll bring this into the project. As you can see, it is pretty simple. And so far, this is just vanilla web components API. It sets the observed attributes, then some default properties values for these attributes. On mount, it is setting a simple input tag as inner HTML, then it calls to update field. All it does is query the input and map these properties values to the input properties. Whenever there is an attribute update, it is parsing the new value and updating these properties and calling the update method again. This works, but the more attribute the component takes or the more complex a component HTML body gets, the worse it becomes. I'll go and grab the same example, but now using markup templates. Here it starts the same way, but there is a template now with markup. It is using dynamic values for these properties. On mount, it is just rendering the template in this component tag, no longer need to update field and DOM manipulation. And whenever there is an attribute change, it is updating the property and calling the update method in the template. Much simpler with no DOM manipulation at all. I'll go back again and copy the final improvement with markup. Here you can see that it reduced to the observed attributes, the properties, and a render function that returns the template referencing props. This is actually using an extension of markup focused on letting you create web components with markup also by before semicolon. Check it out if you really want to use web components with markup templates. It makes things so much easier and it gives you a nicer way to handle states and props. As you can see, even though there is no such thing as component in markup, you can create components and encapsulate logic for reusable templates. You can go to the Get Started page in Markup Docs and see a beautiful example of a full to-do web app with state store. You can see here, nice on the right, the HTML file is simple. Here you can see the button component, a simple function that takes simple options and return a markup template. Now the to-do item using the button with a fairly simple HTML content with the helpers. Now the app, pretty simple handling all the logic. I can play around marking things as done. I can also add a new one. Then delete. Explore the example to understand how to bring everything to life easily. Markup is pretty much a foundation you can consider to create anything upon. For example, you can create your own UI framework and set your project the way you want without DOM manipulation. You can really have fun here. Check the docs for more examples. Enjoy.